There is some disdain towards artists establishing a name in the US, which many people call Western validation. This is interesting because many artists have gone on to establish careers in Japan, China, and other countries, and no one has criticized them for seeking Japanese or Chinese validation. So, what is the difference between establishing a career in countries like Japan and China versus establishing a career in the US? Do these artists really look at America with such high regard that unless they get validation from the West, they can't really be called a success? But in the first place, why must artists even expand outside their own country? Is this expansion or seeking Western validation? And how can we tell the difference?
This is actually one of the most suggested topics in this channel, and a lot of you are actually sending me questions that sort of connect to this concept itself. And I have put off answering and dealing with it primarily because it's one of those malleable concepts for me. It constantly changes, primarily because the world really changes. The world that we are living in changes. The way that we communicate, develop relationships, the technology around us, they're changing. That certain concepts are changing as well, and this is one of them, as I've said. So I've done one video, but after that I've sort of stopped doing videos about it. Okay, if you end up liking this video, please give it a thumbs up, of course, share, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you know when there's a new video getting published. Also, please follow me on all the social media that you see on your screen right now. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm going to start creating new content for that. Also, all the personal stuff will be just on Instagram. Okay, let's go to the video.
No one has complained of Japanese validation. BoA was the first K-pop artist to make it big in Japan, but what many don't know is that a Filipino is often hailed as the biggest foreign artist to make it in Japan. Her name is Marlene de la Peña. She was so big in Japan in the 80s that she would go head-to-head against the likes of Michael Jackson, as in do a concert on the same night and she would outsell them. A few other foreign artists made their way to Japan. TVXQ from South Korea, the Nolans from Ireland, BTS of course goes without saying. They would translate both their native language song to Japanese and make original Japanese music. In interviews, they largely speak in Japanese and follow Japanese decorum. Yet no one has dubbed them sellouts. This is the exact opposite when BTS was making their way to the US. Accusations of being sellouts and suckers for Western validations were popping up like popcorns. So what is it about the US that garners such disdain? It seems that the disdain is only applicable to the West. Does it have anything to do with Western countries being colonizers? The US is often referred to as colonizer, abuser, and many others. Well, Japan and China are no different. While the US currently has some territories, American Samoa, Guam, and other countries, Japan and China tried to colonize other countries in the past. The Philippines, my home country, was one of them. South Korea, in fact, still has a beef with Japan for what Japan tried to do to them. One is just as brutal as the other. Japan and China are just as brutal as the US in the countries they attempted or are attempting to colonize. I know, because they made Filipinos walk thousands of miles while starving us, dehydrating us, hoping we would just drop dead and save the bullets they would be using to kill us. China is by no means a stranger to colonizing countries. In fact, they continue to try to this day. They have taken Mongolia and insist that Taiwan is actually theirs. So, if it's not about colonizing, does it have anything to do with the influence of the country in global affairs? US's latest display of global economic influence is the sanction they imposed on the ruble, the currency of Russia. US banned any trade with Russia after it went to war with Ukraine. But in many other instances before this one, the US has gotten themselves involved in domestic affairs of other countries. Well, China joined hands with Russia and other oil-producing countries to topple the dollar and take over the global financial markets. So, If it isn't about the economic power, maybe the disdain is directed towards the US because it positions itself as the center of global economy and global politics. Well, the US is the world's biggest reserve currency. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into the politics and global economy of it. But until recently, many oil producing countries, for example, accepted only the US dollar for trade. This has given the US incredible amounts of power in just about every global industry. From oil to technology to entertainment, US is able to position itself as the center of global economy because being the world's number one reserve currency, it becomes actually the center of global trade. The point is that no country is spotless. Each has their own agenda, interest, and identity. If you go into a country, you should respect their culture and adhere to their laws and sensibilities. Foreigners that go to Japan should respect Japanese culture. If you can't do that, you shouldn't go there. But what about Western artists? Do they adjust to cultures of other countries? They do. The US adjusts to the countries that impose it. What many don't know is that the US and other countries are all at the mercy of the East as well. When Hollywood sends movies to China, they change the movie in order to comply with Chinese demands. The Avengers, for example, had to add several scenes and introduce major characters in order to feature Chinese actors prominently. Mission Impossible had to re-edit the whole movie per the demand of China. Japan and South Korea limit the exposure of American content in their radio and cinema. When American movies are shown in the Middle East and American musicians perform in the Middle East, they adjust their choreography and the lyrics of their songs to make sure that they adhere to Islamic laws. The problem is that some countries don't demand it from America. Some countries adopt American sensibilities instead of requiring the US to respect theirs. If they stand their ground and their market is big enough, America will adhere to that country. Say what you want to say about China and Japan and other countries. They stand their ground. It's their country and it's their rules. The point is that America shouldn't be an exception to the adoption of the local culture. Validation versus expansion. Perhaps the most important point is to first define what we mean when we say Western validation. Would singing in the English language be considered Western validation? As previously discussed, singing in another language is pretty common. Quite frankly, it is respectful. Of course, there are countries who speak English just as well. Philippines is an example. In fact, many of our local songs are actually in English. Therefore, we don't really demand American artists to speak or sing in our language. That being said, I would still expect American performers to respect Filipino culture. So what about winning awards in the US or entering US charts? Winning an award in the US is celebrated because it is quote-unquote easier to do compared to other countries, and it already has happened. Today, no Asian act has won the Brit Award in the UK. This is considered the Grammy of UK, or Echo Award in Germany, or Japan Records Award in Japan. Judging by the way the media celebrated BTS's 2-day sold-out concert in Wembley, it is just as important if it happens. It simply hasn't happened yet. Therefore, nothing to celebrate. What about collaborating with a Western artist? Is that seeking Western validation? Just like singing in someone else's language, collaborating with a local artist is a way to get local attention. Many Asian artists have collaborated with other Asian artists. Nami Amuro collaborated with After School. Boa also collaborated with Verbal Emflow. TVXQ collaborated with Kodakumi. AOA collaborated with Takanori Nishikawa. JJ Lin collaborated with Chung Yonghwa. Bottom line, we need to define what we mean when we say Western validation. We need to have some basic principle on what we will think is acceptable. Personally, and this is just my own standard, I go back to my own core values. I will always respect another country's culture, regulations, and sensibilities. I do what the Romans do. However, there are things I won't stand for. If, for example, a singer starts singing about child abuse or women abuse because it's cool in that country to do so, no amount of economic expansion can ever justify that to me. If an artist starts talking about mass murdering a race or a group of people based on their faith because the popular artist in that country does so, that's beyond validation. That's just pure evil. So let's decide. What will we consider to be Western validation? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Yep, that's a song. So why go to the US and not other big markets? Other big markets are Germany, UK, France, and I already said Japan. Here's the tea. European countries are actually much more, if not more, protective of their own industry.
US really is one of the most open and welcoming music industries in the world. And I know that's going to sound surprising because I'm constantly criticizing America for being protective of their industry. But if you compare that to Japan and Germany, for example, the second and the third biggest music industries in the world, those two are more protective of their industry than America is. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one would be the language. English is the third most spoken language in the world, I think. First is Chinese, second is Spanish, and third is English. And so the mere fact that that people are speaking the language means that it's easier for them to communicate with people in that country, and of course create music using that language. Next is that the US has established itself as a global music industry, right? And so to a certain extent, it is their obligation to sort of welcome different influences. Third is that this is really sort of where different cultures converge, different races and different people come together. And so it's natural that it becomes more open and that a lot more artists from different cultures and different parts of the world would come here and establish a career here. So that is the, combine that with the fact that the US is the biggest music market in the world, it's easy to understand why there are a lot of artists that are wanting to establish a career here. Now, of course, you can always try to go Japan and then Germany, which is, as I've said, the second and the third biggest music market in the world. But that would mean learning two different languages, learning two different cultures, pursuing two different business plan or whatever. And so as opposed to just going for the biggest market in the world, which makes it easier for you to penetrate other music markets. So yeah, that in itself is a big contributor to why a lot of people are pursuing a career in the US.
Artistic globalization. The market has expanded. Global now includes other countries as opposed to just the US. Maybe it's a function of technology that's blurring geographical and cultural boundaries. We feel closer to each other now because everything is right behind the screen in front of us. Or maybe it's through the efforts and the global success of groups like BTS, movies like The Parasite, and shows like Squid Games. The world is becoming more aware and educated of what lies beyond their own country and the beauty of it all. Maybe there were artists before that were really seeking Western validation, but now that has largely evolved. Many more artists are bringing their own style and their own culture into the global stage. With global technological connection and economic fusion comes cultural amalgamation. For better or for worse, artists will continue to reach out beyond their borders. Instead of criticizing artists who are going global, I think we should learn from them and appreciate the good things they are bringing to their country and their culture. They are introducing their culture to the world. They are solidifying their claim to their own culture and their own art, and that is way better than just giving it away. What we need to do as fans is to also constantly support our own culture. We need to live it. If we're going to demand our artists to make sure they carry the cultural legacy of their country, it has to start from us. They will go where the money goes. If they see us more interested and supportive of their works that speak of our own culture and sensibilities, they will follow. People are too obsessed with division. It's about the East versus the West. Art is the one thing that can really unite us. So why don't we just throw away those differences and focus on actually sharing? While we should nurture our own culture, we should also get the best of both worlds and create a culture that we can all share.
I do think that in about 10 years, the world is going to be unrecognizable to many of us. The way that we're going to be connecting, developing relationship, trading, it's all going to be so different that we won't recognize it at all. And that's just inevitable. I think that's just going to happen. And my hope is for music and for art to be used as a building block, as a foundation in order to unite us all instead of divide us and connect, instead of for us to connect and unite instead of dividing us. Because so far we have been very, very successful in using culture and art and entertainment in dividing us all instead of connecting us and uniting us. But I hope that, I hope that stops. But of course, it is natural for us to want to protect our own culture. But I think instead of criticizing and hating on all of these artists that are trying to establish a career in the West, we should learn from them and nurture the good sides of it and try and mitigate the bad side of it. The good thing is that, number one, they are introducing their own culture to the world. In effect, they're laying claim over it, and that is way better than just allowing somebody else to steal and then benefit from it. At least this way, they're able to lay claim on what is theirs. Second is economically, they are contributing to the economy of their own country, and for as long as we're using money to trade instead of bartering, then that will always matter. Third is that what I've said, as I've said, they are laying the foundation on what could be the uniting factor, the thing that will unite us all instead of divide us. But I think, as I've said, it is natural for us to want to protect our own, to want to nurture our own culture. But I think we can compare it to a friendship, a beautiful, strong friendship. When we have a group of friends, we are different people with different backgrounds, raised differently, different values and beliefs and principles. But when we come together, we share this bond. We have this culture that we all love and that make us all happy. So I hope that music becomes that bond. All right, that's my take on Western validation. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I really do. So please share yours. And as you can always disagree with me, you can always call me out, you can share what it is that you want to say and say what you want to say. For as long as you do it with respect, we're all good. Okay? All right, so please, if you ended up liking this video, give it a thumbs up. And of course, click that notification button and subscribe button so that you know when there's a new video getting published. And of course, share the video if you can, because that's really helping my channel. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. Till next time.